It's preparing to live stream the meeting. Live. Okay. This meeting is being live streamed. Okay. Well, welcome everyone to Central Queens Independent Democrats' first candidate forum of 2022. Hopefully shortly we will be able to do a hybrid type meeting. Now we're doing this virtual. Welcome. I'm getting some feedback. Hold on a moment.
I could jump in while Maria's fixing her audio. For everyone that doesn't know, my name is Ozzy Arujo. I'm the vice president of the club. CQuID was formed about, I would say 18 months ago now, maybe less, a year and some change. We were a bunch of residents in Central Queens who really believe in a mission of economic and racial justice and small d democracy. And we wanted to form an independent club of Democrats that were interested in furthering this mission. This is our first virtual candidate forum in
because it's Ramadan.
Oh,
and I don't know if people broke the fast.
Heather, I think I don't know if you're unmuted or if it's you, just somebody's. So Miriam, so this is our first candidate forum of 2022. We're really excited about it. This is one of two forums for New York State Senate District 17 and New York State Assembly District 28. We're excited to hear from the candidates. We have some interesting questions that really center the mission of our club. And we really appreciate everyone being here on a Monday night, taking some time, whether you're connected, whether you're just listening in. You know, we know people are busy and these are really important issues and really important races. So we're going to get going. Miriam?
Hi, I'm glad to see you all here. I just wanted to explain a little bit about the process we went through to get here. Because we're a new club, we had to start from scratch, and we decided that we were going to think about all of the contested Democratic primaries in Queens, and that we would look at the ones that were either in the area that we think of as our catchment area or very close to it. So our catchment is, Elmhurst, Regal Park, Forest Hills, Kew Gardens, Briarwood, Ridgewood, Glendale, Woodhaven, and Richmond Hill. So we picked 4 districts, the new Senate District 17 that goes through most of it, and 3 ADs where there are contested elections. And we're going to look at one of those tonight, which is District 28. The other 2 we're going to deal with in 2 weeks. We also decided that we felt like there's too little information available to the public, and that it would be a good public service for us to interview all of the candidates. We also felt like that was good for the members of our club, that since it's a relatively small group of districts that we were looking at, we could consider them all. And that would be, we didn't want to have some small group pre-selected. And we wrote to all of the candidates and gave them a chance. A couple of them did not respond, or in one case decided not to participate and let us know that. So tonight we're going to be hearing from all four of the candidates that are running in Senate District 17, and one of the two candidates that are running in 28, Assembly District 28. And we're live streaming it as a public service. At 9:30, after we've heard from all the candidates, we are going to turn it into a private meeting only for CQuID members. We're going to discuss them at 10 o'clock. We're going to close that. We'll have a ballot that goes out to our members with voting privileges. You know, you have to pay dues and go to a certain number of meetings. It's most, but not all of the people that are, and we'll be sending out a ballot. The people have a few days to vote, and they have to get past the 60% mark to get endorsed. They have to get 60% of the ballots. So we'll be announcing that probably next Monday for these two districts. Really, that's all I have to say. I think that we should start. Is our first candidate? Yeah, he's in the waiting room, Andy, so we can get going now. Okay.
So thanks so much, Miriam. Myself and Ashley Reed will be moderating tonight's
Raj.
forum, and Raj as well. And so Ashley, do you want to just introduce yourself, and Raj as well? And then Ashley, you can kind of explain to Andrew Hevesy what the format is and how things will go. Welcome, Assemblymember Hevesy.
Thank you, Ozzy, and thank you, Assemblymember. We see you here. So how tonight is going to go, each candidate will have 2 minutes to give a brief intro, and then we will ask the questions that we have prepared. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to respond. If there's time, we may allow for follow-up, and then we'll allow some time for closing, and then we'll move on to our next candidate. So I believe we can get started. The Assemblyman is here. Assemblyman Andrew Hevesy, welcome. If there's time, and then can we unmute him?
Ashley, can I just add, maybe just to be clear, so you have 2 minutes for an intro. That's gonna be followed by 7 questions. You'll have 90 seconds to answer each question. If you look in your chat, Sahand is keeping time, and he'll put in the chat when there's 30 seconds left, he'll write it in there. And then he'll say time at the end, and Ashley or myself will help you wrap up if you need any help. We don't have the music. We're not going to play the music though.
I've been played off before, but that's okay.
Okay. So Mr. Hevesy, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. Thank you to the Central Queens Independent Democrats for allowing me the opportunity to be here this evening. I really appreciate the chance to talk to you about my record, and I see a lot of friends here, so hi to everybody. I hope everybody's doing well. I think the best way for me to describe who I am as an assemblyman is to report to you what happened in the last budget in this last couple of days, which I am the most proud of. On the issue that I've been able to work on. I also will tell you this is one of the worst budgets I've ever seen, and we can touch on some of that as well. Some really disgusting, ugly, racist things happened in the budget I'm happy to go into. But I am currently the chair of the Children and Families Committee, and based off of that work with my colleagues in government in both houses, we can report to you that New York State's budget this year will be the largest single investment in children in New York State history. There will be $7 billion invested in childcare, and I can go into more detail about how that will manifest is 400,000 new childcare slots across the state because we've increased the poverty level from 200 to 300. I can tell you more about that, but let me move on to There's an additional $375 million investment in universal pre-K upstate, and those systems have to be aligned. In addition to that, there is $15.6 million that will be used to put child care centers into every SUNY campus, every one of them. We have also put money into Youth Build, which is a program for 16 to 17-year-old kids who are at risk. We also put money, $11 million, into home visiting. We also put $2 million into runaway and homeless youth. So you get my point. This was the most successful that we have been ever in helping kids. And I'm very proud of that and happy to talk more. And again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will begin with our first question. The first question will be asked by Lauren.
Good evening, Assembly Member Hevesi. My name is
Good
Lauren
evening.
Clavin. I'm a resident of Kew Gardens and your constituent. About the budget, in terms of the childcare, yes, we are getting $7 billion over the next few years. I'm wondering if you could comment. It's my understanding that undocumented immigrants are excluded from that, and I'm wondering if you could comment on that.
100%. So we took the position in the assembly with me as the lead that you had to get those kids as well. That's my belief in my core. We were fighting for that. It was a hard no from the executive. And it was disappointing. Now, I will tell you a couple of things. First, the undocumented immigrant children, the eligibility is based off of the citizenship of the child, okay, not the parents. So that does shrink the population that we're dealing with. But we have set up a circumstance now, which I fought against, where even if you have one child who's undocumented, another who is documented in the same family, they're being treated disparately. So it is my intention as chair of the committee to be moving bills within the next couple of weeks. One would be an attestation of work requirements, and some others that I'm working with my colleagues Catalina Cruz and Jessica Gonzalez Rojas and Sarah Clark. And we're going to go make sure that those kids are treated like every other kid in the state of New York. I was disheartened that that was one of the things we lost on. There were several other things that were pushed back, but we in the assembly and me personally have always taken the position that the immigrant kids are our kids and they need to be treated like everybody else. And we never quit. I'm going to come back and make sure that those kids get the same services that everybody else does.
Thank you. And if there's time, just quickly, if you can comment, you said that in your questionnaire, you support the Invest in Our New York proposals to raise taxes on the uber wealthy.
Sure.
Can you quickly explain why?
Sure. Okay. That's a great question. It's kind of a setup. So I have spent, before I took over this position as Children and Families Chair, I was chair of the Social Services Committee for the last, I'd say it was 5 years before that. And all of this time living under the remarkably bad and stupid and hurtful 2% cap imposed by the last governor, that intentional austerity, which sort of was a lie, and I can get into that. But what that has done was systematically taken money out of programs that help people in the worst needs. So I could tell you about homelessness, but I'll put that aside for now. By the way, this is across state government. There is not one state agency that has not been gutted to its core and dropped down to levels where we're not able to care for people. And you're seeing some of the problems manifest. So if you have mentally ill people, we don't have treatment. If you're looking to prevent trauma in kids, we don't have childcare. I could keep going on. So for me, absolutely, to get right, the only way to do that is to tax the uber wealthy. I'm completely comfortable with that, and I've been outspoken about that in my career, and I will lead the fight going forward. That's something that we really need to do to make the system work, because I believe, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on the former governor, but he is part of a crew of people who don't want government to help people. They actually let government not do its job, and then we'll propose things like we need to lock more people up, or they need to come into our homeless shelters. I will tell you, the last governor ran shelters. So it's ugly stuff, but I would tax as much as is needed to get the systems back into their shape where they can actually help people. Thanks for the question.
Thank you for your response.
Sure.
Our next question will come from Jonathan.
Good evening, Mr. Hevesi. We know from the new IPCC report that we're falling behind in our climate commitments. The new report has a bigger message. The future we fear is not inevitable. In New York State, we have failed to produce adequate action to address the climate emergency. What do you think is the most important step or steps we should take?
It's a good question. So I agree with that report. And I will tell you that one of the things we passed in this budget was an expansion of the State Environmental Bond Act. Very proud to work with my colleague, Steve Engelbright, who is the chair of that particular committee. I think that's just one of the investments we need. Again, this is yet another part of government that has been shrunken down. So yeah, I'm very proud that we have not a significant win, but a small win in this year's budget, which shows that we have the ability and the wherewithal to go and try to address these problems long term. And the Bond Act was one example of that.
Andy, what
Thank
about
you.
the next session? Anything you think we should pass?
Well, there's tons of bills to pass, but I want to be completely candid with you. So as chair of the Children and Families Committee, I spend almost all of my time focusing in that realm, and I do have to rely on some of my colleagues who spend more of their time on those issues, and that's why I follow Steve Engelbright. I'm going to lean on him. He's a geologist by trade. He's also been the chair of the Environmental Conservation Committee for the past 7 years. And I have voted for almost every bill that he has brought up. So I don't have a prospective idea of where to go next. I want to be candid, but I will follow the leadership of my friends.
Okay, next question.
Yeah, next question. Do you support expanding our mass transportation system? If so, how?
Oh, sure, absolutely. So I think the mass transportation system is the lifeblood of New York City. One of the things we have to really guard against is it falls into disrepair like we had in the 1970s. But it's so yes, I would look to expand. My problem though, and I'll be completely candid, is it seems to me in my limited experience in government that pouring money into the MTA is almost like a black hole. There is very little accountability. I know it's easy to beat up on a public authority, but some of you stood on a corner with me a couple of weeks ago with Senator Chuck Schumer, who was saying we've invested money to, at the bare minimum, make sure that our transit system is ADA compliant. And if you think about that, the ADA was passed in the 1980s. There's money to fix it. We put money from the federal government and the state government, and the MTA still hasn't fixed it. We don't have elevators in certain places. So the answer is absolutely yes. By the way, my commitment to the mass transit system, I would point back a couple of years ago when I took a vote to add more of a surcharge on the drivers in my community, because I believe if we didn't, that the MTA would have fallen into a state of terrible disrepair. So yes, I've been a supporter of expanding access to transit. I think it's crucially important, but I am cautious about how you do it, and I frankly don't trust the quasi-governmental function of some public authorities, the MTA included.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
So next question, criminal justice. You can divide the 2 minutes how you see fit.
Sure.
Final budget included rollbacks of New York's landmark 2019 bail reforms, changes to its discovery laws, and expansions of pre-arraignment detention and involuntary inpatient mental health treatment.
Yeah.
Do you agree with these rollbacks? Which ones? Why or why not? How would you address concerns? Sorry, let's start with that. And then what can you do that in 1 minute?
I'll give it a shot. Okay. The rollbacks that we swallowed in this budget were based off absolute lies, and it's one of the lowest moments of my career in the assembly. And I will tell you that the reason why we did it, full candor, was we were afraid, and this is the entire legislature, and we fought about this consistently, but we were afraid if we did not make these moves, that what we were going to get was a Governor Suozzi, a Governor Zeldin, or we were going to lose the supermajority in the New York State Senate, where everything else that we've achieved over the last 3 years could have been rolled back. I hate every one of these bail reform pieces. I also have been very public about the fact that the Kendra's Law piece, where they are now allowed to take presumed mental illness and lock people up, is unconstitutional. It's also one of the ugliest reminders in history of terrible, it's a red flag for, terrible events in history where we let government the ability to take people off the streets and lock them up. And let me go back. This is a result of us not investing in mental health services. So we fought those fights. First of all, the Kendra's law, I believe, is going to be immediately overturned. But the others, yes, we swallowed it, and it was one of the worst things we've ever had to do.
Thank you. All right, last criminal justice question. We're going to keep it to a minute. So the concerns about rising crime in New York City. Last 2020, we saw a lot of concerns raised about our oversized police force in New York, lack of accountability, and also sort of this wide breadth of services that the NYPD is called on to try and address. So now we have a mayor on the city level that that's brought back stop and frisk policing, something that in New York City, the way New York City was doing it was ruled unconstitutional, broken windows policing, and both have shown that they disproportionately go after Black and brown people, or Black and brown folks are disproportionately policed. And so, again, concerns of rising crime, we see hate crimes, we're seeing a lot of this on the news. How do you address it? And do you think this current approach is best?
No, I think the current approach is remarkably stupid, but I think we're boxed into a corner. So let me tell you where I am, and I hope I can get it done in a minute. So first, crime has risen across the country. The idea that you attach that to a local bail law is just a lie. And the lie goes this way. It's what they call a post hoc fallacy. You take two true statements, you put them together to create a false impression. In this case, it is crime is up in New York State and bail reform was at the same time, and that's the false impression. Absolutely untrue. There is no data that bears that out. How you deal with crime is where I started at the beginning, which is you invest in kids and do trauma prevention. 90% of the kids in the criminal justice system, in juvenile justice and the child welfare, 90% have repeated adverse childhood experiences and repeated trauma, many of them before the age of 5. So when I'm talking about trauma, that's physical abuse, that's sexual abuse, that's witnessing domestic violence, all other kinds of trauma. And New York State has gotten out of the business, and I can outline this in great detail, of preventing and helping those kids who've been traumatized, so they later wind up believing that there's nobody there for them, and the only people around are going to be their friends who are doing bad things. So it's a cycle. Can I ask for an extra 30 seconds just to finish this point?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, yes. Okay.
Yes. Okay. So this cycle is perpetuated by a crew of elected officials who are telling us for years that you have to do austerity, you can't spend. And then as a consequence, when traumatized kids go out and pick up guns, they come back with the racist answer of, now you got to lock them up. Now, we in the assembly fought back as hard as we could, but we lost this year. And it's one of the worst moments in my career.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Assemblyman. All right, we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about homelessness. The next question will come from Anicia.
Good evening, Assembly. Have a seat. There's a lot of complaints about homeless humans in public spaces, and a lot of complaints about the mayor's administrations have been cleaning homeless encampments. According to the New York Times on March 30, the mayor's office said the New York Police Department, in partnership with the Department of Sanitation, cleared 239 encampments in 12 days, but only 5 people of those sites agreed to go to the homeless shelter. This doesn't seem like a human approach and an effective one. How do you think we should address homeless?
It's a great question. So let me go back. As social services chair, there are 2 ways to address homelessness. First, you prevent it by adequately funding a rent supplement at the market rate. We haven't had that for years. We fought for one under Governor Cuomo. Weren't able to get it. That's number one. And then the second thing is, and you invest heavily in what New York State created in the 1970s, which is the only way to deal with people with the chronically mental illness or other sustained substance abuse and other issues, which is supportive housing, where they have a stable home and on-site services. Those are the only mechanisms. So what you're talking about with the street sweeps, and also putting homeless shelters in every neighborhood and putting them on Randall's Island where they can't be seen. That's all a part of a government failure to do the 2 things that help. rent supplements and supportive housing. And because we in government have gotten so used to not solving problems, you wind up with, yes, you have to lock more people up. Yes, you have to expand Kendra's law. Yes, you're going to have to sweep people off the street. This is all function of a state government failure.
Thank you.
Thank you. How about the senior citizens housing situation in our district?
That's one minute. If you could.
That we need more housing? Sure. We are in an affordable housing crisis. Let me lead with that. It was specific to seniors. That's why I got thrown a little bit.
Sure.
But it's a great question. We are in an affordable housing crisis, which is, again, I'm going to keep coming back to the same theme, which is New York State government is not focused on solving problems. We're looking for Band-Aids. So for the affordable housing crisis, we are consistently rolling out, and we rejected one this year, tax breaks to incentivize affordable housing. Now, I believe, as homeless services chairman and my limited experience visiting homeless shelters on the homeless Coalition for the Homeless Monitors list, that you have to create housing, but doing it through these Band-Aids where you're not creating enough housing and they wind up gentrifying neighborhoods, and then also to great benefits to certain citizens of means, are just not the way to do it. So what I have recommended to the speaker, and what I would recommend publicly, is you attack the property tax system, which is the driver of these problems, instead of slapping on another Band-Aid like some of these tax breaks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next question will come from Somali King. Somali is muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you for being here, Assemblyman. My topic is on education. Education has become a divisive issue among parent communities throughout the city. We are hearing and reading more and more about parents' overall frustration of the entire education system. As a parent whose children have attended public, parochial, and private schools, and who has gone through the middle school, high school, and most recently college admission process, my question for you is, what is your vision of education equity in these debates?
It's a great question. Thank you. So every year in the state, we, including this past budget, we look to do as much as an infusion of cash into the systems that have been underfunded. I will also tell you that I do not agree with taking taxpayer money and putting it towards other schools, charter schools, which sometimes have good results. But what you essentially have is two separate systems of education, which is just not what I am for. So you need to continue to invest. And remember, we're coming off of just recently, thanks to Senator Robert Jackson, some of our colleagues leading the charge, starting to pay down the campaign for fiscal equity. So you need to continue to invest, and it needs to be sustained, and it needs to be redirected. Another problem is, I know that some of the money that we send down to the state does not get into the districts. I talked to my colleagues from some neighborhoods, and while in our neighborhood, I would argue that we have relatively good and successful schools, some of my colleagues in the exact same position just do not. And I think there's a problem with that we need to address at a local level.
Great, thank you so much.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so next up we have a question from Raj.
Hi, Assembly Member. Good to see you.
Yes, sir.
I have a multi-part question. How do you think of your role in the legislature? You've alluded to this already, but maybe you could talk about it more. And how would you push an issue that the leader or governor doesn't support? Maybe not yet. And finally, how do you address the needs of your constituents? Kind of legislature and constituents, those two points.
Okay. Well, let me take the first part first. So my role in the New York State Legislature is to be a uniting force. I believe that the former governor had been very divisive. I believe some of my colleagues fall into that category as well. That's not the way to govern. The way that we had success, and we have had success over the years, is to unite. So for example, the reason why you have this investment in childcare is because, and I hate politicians who take credit, but this is election time. We built a coalition of 88 assembly members out of the 104 in the assembly, plus another 30 senators that drove the need for these investments in childcare. I was also able to do it when we passed a law that was signed in December that eliminated the school to prison pipeline for young kids 7 to 12. My role in the assembly is to come up with a solution and build consensus and build a coalition. And as my role for an assembly member, we are here to serve. One of the things that drives me crazy about some elected officials is that if you call their office, they will say, well, I'm not federal government, or I'm not city government, or it's not my district. That's not how we operate. We are paid by the taxpayers to do everything we can in every circumstance to try to guide them to a solution. And I have one of the best staffs. I'll stack my staff up against anybody in state government, pound for pound, that we do the best constituent services anywhere.
Thank you. And if a quick follow-up on pushing, right, an issue you really strongly feel about, right, that maybe the leadership or the governor is not on board with yet. How have you tackled that, and how would you tackle that going forward?
Sure. And I'm gonna tell you how strongly I pushed on an issue that I fought for 8 years and lost. So with the former governor, I told you at the beginning when we were talking about homelessness that I fought for a program that we had created in conjunction with the Coalition for the Homeless and the Legal Aid Society. Basically, it's a rent supplement, but we called it the Home Stability Support. I had 8 years of battles with that governor, and it got nasty. I went after everything I could, from his campaign contributions to the fact that he runs homeless shelters, to the fact that he was remarkably stupid. I don't think anybody would say that I've been shy about speaking truth to power. I went after him because what I knew what he was doing was intentionally allowing people to fall into homelessness so a certain segment of the population can profit by increased city contracts for homeless shelters. And the former mayor was a part of this as well by saying we have to have 90 shelters in each in the city of New York. So my battles with the last administration speak for themselves. Speak for itself. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Our final question for tonight will come from Maria Coffer.
Hi, Maria.
Hey, hi, Assembly Member.
Okay.
How much money has your campaign raised? Did you accept any corporate contributions? Do you pledge not to accept contributions from real estate, health insurance, fossil fuel companies, or police unions?
Maria, you're breaking
Real
up a little bit.
estate, do you
Can you
pledge
repeat the
not to
question?
accept contributions from real estate, health insurance, fossil fuels, and police unions?
Okay, so up until this point, I haven't raised much. I think I make a point of not raising for a variety of reasons. I hate it, but we have right at now on hand less than 25,000. However, I just found out today I have a competitive opponent. He has made the ballot. So I am going to start raising. I'm going to start raising seriously. Now, I've made a commitment to the Working Families Party and some of my friends here that I will not take money from law enforcement, but I cannot make that commitment with these other entities that you're talking about. I'm in a competitive race. And I honestly believe that if my opponent becomes the assembly person, he doesn't share the same values that I share. And so I'm going to arm myself to make sure I don't lose this seat, even if it takes taking money from some entities that we don't like. That's just the nature of the business. Now, I will tell you, I have tried to avoid doing that. I'm not the guy who raises. There are many elected officials that are come on, they're going to tell you, I have huge bank accounts. I never have done that. But now that I'm being challenged, and now that my ability to help people in my district and in the state of New York are being challenged, I'm going to raise a significant amount of funds to be competitive.
Thank you for your being candid and transparent. So, if you can take a minute and wrap up, give us some closing remarks, anything you'd like to share with us before you go.
1 minute. Sorry for the shortness. For the
No, it's okay. I just want to say, listen, I believe I share the values of the people in this community and also of this club. I will tell you what my next goal is, and we're going to start on this immediately. While we did have success in this year by a mass infusion of money into childcare and pre-K and other services, we have failed when it comes to the child welfare system, which I believe is I've been studying the history, which is designed as a way to surveil and then, unfortunately, to separate mostly one community from their from kids and families. We're going to go after that with everything we can. I have a bill to do that, an anonymous reporting bill. My friend Latrice Walker has some bills. We're going to make a concerted effort. Also, I will tell you, we underinvest in kinship care. We underinvest in foster care. All of those are components of a child welfare system that is an abject failure, where I'm going to end with this. The through line through all of my work, and I didn't mention this at the beginning, is childhood trauma. I believe that the child welfare system is a place where kids and families are traumatized, and then the government comes in and responds with separating families. That's more trauma, and that's just stupid government. So we're going to take a real crack at it legislatively over the next couple of months. One of the things I've realized about myself is I hate the systems that put us in a position where we have to make these short-term stupid fixes, like we have to do bail reform because we didn't invest in preventing problems.
I'm sorry.
Indra's law because we didn't invest in mental health. You get the idea. So it's the systems that I'm just going to go after. It's child welfare is next.
Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman.
It's been a pleasure. Is that it? Am I out?
That's it. Thank you very much for being with us.
All right. Thank you for taking the time, guys. Good luck tonight. Thank you.
Good
We
night.
wish you the best.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So I'm going to be moderating the next session, next candidate interview. And is Liz Crowley here? Elizabeth Crowley?
Yes, she's in the waiting room.
All right, can we just let her in?
Okay.
Hi, Elizabeth. Welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Ozzy Arujo. I am the Vice President of CQuID. I'm going to give you just the rundown of what we're going to be doing. We're on a tight timeline because we have a few candidates that are being interviewed tonight. You're going to have 2 minutes for an intro. We're going to ask you about 7-ish questions and maybe a couple of follow-ups. 1 minute to answer each question. I'm sorry, 1 minute, 30 seconds to answer each question. Sahand is our timekeeper. If you look in the chat, he'll put in when you're at 30 seconds. He's gonna, Sahand, can you actually unmute yourself and just say time? I think it'll be more helpful once we hit that 90 seconds. And a follow-up question, we prefer, if you could, do it in a minute or less. And then you'll have 1 minute at the end to answer, just to give your closing remarks. Cool? Okay, welcome again. Thanks for being here. Our first question will be from Lauren. Lauren, do you want to just introduce yourself?
Oh,
Sorry, opening remarks first.
Oh, opening remarks. You're right. I'm getting ahead of myself. Sorry. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Good evening. I want to thank CQuID for hosting tonight's candidates forum. Sorry if I'm a little late. I'm coming off an interview from a union for an endorsement panel that went later than I would have liked. But it's good to see everybody. It's good to see a strong participation on this candidates forum this evening. My name is Elizabeth Crowley. I'm running for State Senate to be the representative of the new State Senate District 17. This is an area of Queens and a part of Brooklyn, but the area of Queens, which is many neighborhoods, but is where I grew up and where I've raised my 2 sons, still raising them, and had the opportunity to serve as a New York City council member. Now, there are a lot of issues facing the district as there are the city and the state. Some of them will have an opportunity to talk about education, housing, transit, and overall affordability. Now, this, as I said, is the district I represented as a council member. And when I inherited the district, it was the most overcrowded school district in the city. We built over 6,000 new classroom seats. And the district I represent is no longer overcrowded, but Long Island City is one of the fastest growing zip codes in the entire country. And Greenpoint is not far behind. And both of those areas are in need of schools, the housing situation in our city. Far too many families are in temporary housing. We need real affordability. I have a plan that would open a transit line running the whole length of the district, which runs the border of Brooklyn from Long Island City to Jamaica, that is the train line, but the district runs from Ozone Park, South Ozone Park, to Long Island City and Greenpoint. This transit line will take people out of cars. There's so much congestion if you're on a bus or in a car on our streets, because many of the communities along this new state Senate seat are not in a transit-rich area. So congestion is definitely an issue. Did somebody time? Because I only saw 1 minute there. I didn't see 30 seconds. So I went and just
Sorry.
understood. Want to keep you on time.
Yes, thank you. First question will be from Lauren.
Good evening, Ms. Crowley. Thank you for being here. My name is Lauren Clavin. You mentioned some issues that you're concerned about that are issues that you feel are important in your district. I'm wondering if one would like to comment on the recent budget that was passed, and also second part, and you can answer this in whatever way order you wish. You mentioned in your questionnaire that you do support the Invest in Our New York proposals that would raise taxes on the very rich. And can you expound on that?
Sure. First, I've raised my two sons here as a single mom, and I was happy to see the expansion of childcare programs in our state budget. So I do believe that's one good aspect. I know that so many of our families are struggling, and we need to build more affordable housing. And when we look at the budget, it just didn't do enough for housing, and we need to also clean our environment. And I was happy to see that more funds were put in to clean brownfields, and there are many brownfields within this district all along the Newtown Creek. So those are some aspects of the budget that I support, and I certainly am 100% in favor of raising taxes on the wealthiest New Yorkers.
Quickly, a follow-up. You said you're happy about the childcare element of the budget. I'm wondering if you would comment on the fact that undocumented families are not included in that.
I support extending all benefits in the budget that are extended to families with documents to families that are not documented. They needed just as much. I mentioned earlier, I felt guilty when I was dropping my sons off, or always feeling like it was difficult when they were young to find proper childcare and affordable childcare. But in hindsight, it was better for them. And I know just that when our kids are early learners or in an environment, regardless of their status, their parents' status, that they'll do better in life having early childhood education and good childcare providers from a young age.
Thank you.
Our next question, Jonathan Lazo.
Good evening, Ms. Crowley. My question's in two parts. You can answer it whichever way you'd like. We know from the new IPCC report that we're falling behind in our climate commitments. Today's report has a bigger message. The future we fear is not inevitable. In New York State, we have failed to produce adequate action to address the climate emergency. What do you think is the most important step or steps we should take? And do you support expanding our mass transit system? If so, how?
Jonathan, thank you for that question. When I was studying in school, I went to Pratt for graduate school to study urban planning and the environment. And I did that because I felt that we at the time, back in 2004, were not doing enough. And we're certainly not doing enough to stop climate change. Consider me a climate change warrior. When I left the council with, I served 9 years on the New York City Council, so I have experience, and each year we did more and more, always getting 100% rating with the New York League of Conservation Voters for the work that I did at the council. And I had a study, which answers part of your question, your second question, to look at the rails. We have rails running through our communities without moving anything on them, at times freight does move on some of these tracks. Some of them are dormant and nothing is happening. And one of those tracks, the one that I referenced in my opening statement, is the Lower Montauk branch of the Long Island Railroad, wholly owned by the MTA, and can very well move passengers and change communities in and around the district. So we're only starting to see the MTA put significant investment in these types of rails. One is currently happening in the Bronx. It's considered a Metro North line. We need to also make sure that the fares on these Metro North Long Island Railroad for New York City residents is a one-swipe MetroCard fare. And I also support eliminating any type of fee on our buses.
Thank you.
Can I have a quick follow-up? Your line is the QNS, correct, on the Lower Montauk?
The QNS has a mission that includes both the Lower Montauk, and today I formally stepped down as chair. It is an organization I started after leaving the council. It's a nonprofit to move this line forward. And before the governor announced her support for part of the Triborough extension, the nonprofit expanded its mission to also include not only the Lower Montauk branch, but also the Bay Ridge branch, which is also known as the Triborough, which has been pushed by the Regional Plan Association for 25 years.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Did that answer your question there, Jonathan? I'm sorry.
Yeah, the first part, yeah. How would you change the existing freight service on the line? How would that be changed? Will the freight service in the nighttime be put on it, or will it be changed to trucking in those communities?
So as I mentioned, when I left the council in 2008, just at that time, the study was getting finalized now. So not up to me, so to say, I would do this, you would do that. You have engineering companies that study the line and they study the feasibility, and they studied this line and found that it would be very much compatible to do freight in the nighttime and move passengers for 20 hours out of the day. This is already happening. The freight is kept in a window because the freight uses the main line of Long Island Railroad when it goes east, and when it goes up north, it uses the Amtrak line, and it has to compete with passenger service. So therefore, it's limited to a very short window. And same is true for the Triborough line as well. So when it is compatible, I don't get to decide. We have professionals that have much more experience with engineering and trains than I do.
Elizabeth, 30 seconds. You're going in, you're running for state Senate. When you get in there, but let's say you were in there right now, what legislation, do you want to see when it comes to climate?
When it comes to climate,
what existing legislation?
We have a percentage of our budget. We just passed a $220 million budget. We need to make sure that we keep a certain percent. I would say 5% of the budget that we're gonna. What's that? That's anything that happens in a budget is legislation.
Is there bills out there? Is there a bill that you want to see pushed?
I would like to get a plan together. There isn't a real plan to move our private-owned power authorities to no longer be dependent on fossil fuels. Now, there's talk about them moving away from this, and we don't have a real plan. And I would like to see a plan put together, and I would like to hold their feet to the fire and say, we need a plan that's going to show how we're decreasing our dependency and when we can finally move our state to,
thank you.
To be carbon free and without a footprint.
Next question is going to come. Actually, that's me. We're doing criminal justice. 2 minutes, you divide the time as you see fit. Final budget included rollbacks of New York's landmark 2019 bail reforms, changes to its discovery laws, expansions of pre-arraignment detention, and involuntary inpatient mental health treatment. Do you agree with these rollbacks? Which ones? Why or why not? And then the second part of this is crime, concerns of rising crime. We've seen some of the stuff on the news. We've seen hate crimes, stuff on the subways. A couple of years ago, there was a big sort of uprising that was folks concerned about our oversized police force, lack of accountability, and the NYPD just having a scope of responsibilities that seemed unreasonable. Now, on the city level, our mayor has brought back stop and frisk and broken windows policing. Both have stop and frisk in its iteration back then was ruled unconstitutional by a court. Both broken windows policing and stop and frisk have all the data shows that they disproportionately target Black and brown folks, and also the poor. So how would you address crime, and do you think that's the right approach?
Oh, wow. I think your question was 2 minutes. How do I answer that all? Well, let me first tell you, I was one of the first council members to entertain the idea of closing Rikers and stood there with the Close Rikers campaign before any of the council members, or even before the speaker said that it was going to be a policy that she was pushing. So know that I am a justice reformer. I chaired the committee on criminal justice, as it was known at the time, because nobody else wanted to chair it. It had to do with fire services as well, and the mayor was closing firehouses. Long story, but it wasn't a sought after committee. I didn't have a lot of seniority when I came onto the council, and I kept the committee for the 8 years that I was chair, because there were so many issues that needed to be addressed. And we had over 40 hearings on justice reform when I was, and you know, some of the reform that we were able to get passed even was state policy, you know, raise the age. That's something I wholeheartedly support. And I was glad that it wasn't part of the budget, because the mayor has been pushing for it. I don't agree with that. And let me tell you that I went on Channel 1 back then. You know, I had the experience as a proven fighter and fought for this legislation to be passed. I pushed a for-profit prison provider out of Rikers Island, literally letting New Yorkers die not getting the health care they deserve. I have a proven track record of being a justice fighter when people weren't even talking about what was happening.
Just want to ask you about right now. Could you tell us what you think you're doing?
That is relevant, because the mayor wanted to roll back, raise the age. And that is something that we have to continue to fight, because you know,
city level,
the budget is one aspect, but then when you get to legislation could still pass. You could still have legislation passing.
Broken windows policing, stop and frisk, yes or no?
No, I don't support stop and frisk, and I don't support broken windows policing.
Thank you. Next question will come from Anicia.
Good evening, Mr. Crowley. There's a lot of complaints about homeless humans in public spaces, and a lot of complaints about how this mayoral administration has been clearing homeless encampments. According to the New York Times on March 30th, the mayor's office said the New York City Police Department, in partnership with the Department of Sanitation, cleared 239 encampments in 12 days. But only 5 people on those sites agreed to go to homeless shelters. This doesn't seem like a humane approach or an effective one. My question is, how do you think we should address homeless?
Thank you for that question. It's so important, Anicia. It's great. One of the greatest crises facing our city right now. We do not have affordable housing. We do not have enough affordable housing. And then we have situations where people can have access to temporary housing and they choose to be on the street instead. I mentioned the transportation plan that I had earlier, but it would also open opportunity for real affordability and real housing. I also support the plan to turn commercial space into housing, permanent housing. You know, I went against Mayor de Blasio's failed plan when he was pushing families out of cluster apartments, which might have been a bad situation, but at least it was permanent. And he was taking families with kids in one borough and moving them into another, into a hotel, a bad situation, into a worse. I support, you know, giving more vouchers to families, the state increasing the amounts of vouchers, making sure that we're extending all the housing services that we extend to people with documents to those without documents. We need to also increase opportunities for home ownership. And I believe that working people could have an opportunity and should have an opportunity. This is the American dream borough. It needs to remain that. And lastly, when we do have families in shelters, we have to make sure that they're getting wraparound services and that our kids are getting to school early, well-fed, after-school programs, summer programs, and that employment opportunities are provided, as well as real access to stable, affordable, permanent housing.
Thank you.
Thank you. My other question is, what about the senior housing problems in our district?
1 minute.
We're not building enough affordable housing, and that we're not protecting our seniors. So I want to protect our seniors from predatory landlords that are trying to entice them with cash grants and push them out of the housing. I believe in good cause eviction, that there has to be a reason, and there generally isn't. I feel like too many of our seniors are struggling with the cost of living, and there isn't enough set asides in these affordable housing complexes that are being built. You know, we're giving way too much to real estate and the wealthy in terms of tax breaks, and we're not building enough real affordable housing. And then when we do build affordable housing, we're not setting aside enough for our seniors. And I would support a massive growth in affordable housing, truly affordable, and make sure that we have a significant fraction set aside for our growing senior population.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next question will come from Somali.
Hi, Elizabeth. Thanks for being here. I wanted to address education. Education has become a very divisive issue among parent communities throughout the city. We are hearing and reading more and more about parents' overall frustration of the entire education system. As a parent whose children have attended public, parochial, and private school, and who has gone through the middle school, high school, and most recently college admission process, my question for you is, what is your vision of education equity in these debates?
Thank you, Somalia. Thank you. It's good to see you, and thank you for that question. When I first became a council member, I don't think I mentioned it in the opening, but I did create I had the most overcrowded school district, created over 6,000 classroom seats. Access to schools near where kids live that aren't overcrowded is so important. We also need to have programs that meet the learners' needs. If our children are learning challenged, we need to make sure that their neighborhood school has programs to meet those challenges. Additionally, if they're above their grade level and are considered what we know gifted and talented, we need those programs. Queens sends over 16,000 students every year outside of the borough to go to high school. When I was a council member, I helped build 2 new high schools in the district. And I believe we need to invest in local high schools. And then I think that kids would be more prepared for college by the time they have these schools in their neighborhoods providing the type of learning environments that they need. I believe in summer school, early childhood education, food in the school, after school programs. The more time our kids in school, the better options they are at getting into a good college. And when they get there, I believe that we need to make CUNY completely free. But in addition to that, I support their ASAP program, which is an accelerated associate's degree. In 3 years, it gives funds to our students for transportation, and so that they can take summer and winter classes so they can graduate on time. We're not talking about that program enough, but it's important.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Next question will be asked by Raj.
Hi, Ms. Crowley. Good evening.
Mhm.
So I have kind of a multi-part question, but please answer it in however order you see fit. How do you envision your role in the legislature, and how would you push an issue that the leader or governor may not support yet? And finally, how will you address the needs of your constituents, given that this is a brand new district? Thank you.
First, let me talk about the last part of your question, which I think will lead into the first part of your question. You're elected by the people to serve the people. It's a privilege. I always felt that, given my time as a council member, you have to be accessible. Community constituents should feel comfortable coming to your office with a concern, and you are there to listen. And that's a big part, and understand what their experience is and try to make their lives better. And, if they're going through something difficult that we could help them with, we should. And that is exactly the role of a state senator that I'd like to be. And how would I get the governor and the mayor, or I'm sorry, like the governor or other state legislators' attention, or the public's attention? For example, when I first became a council member, we were going through a difficult time. It was just after the financial crisis of 2008. There were budget cuts left and right. The mayor at the time wanted to close 20 firehouses, and many of those firehouses were in communities of great need. And what I did was work. The mayor did not want to keep these firehouses open. It was an awful battle. But I worked with the community, had rallies, we brought attention to the issue. We were able to get in the paper and on television and press outlets. People were talking about what was going on. We fought the mayor and we won. So I know how to bring public attention to an issue and get ultimately the mayor or the governor to move on that particular issue.
So Molly King will be asking the last question.
Yeah, just quickly to turn to your campaign, a couple of quick questions. How much money has your campaign raised? Did you accept any corporate contribution? Did you pledge not to accept contribution from real estate, health insurance, fossil fuel companies, or police unions? Why or why not?
The campaign, I'm coming off the heels of a campaign where we had well over 2,000 donors and the average contribution was under $100. I believe the campaign has raised over $200,000. I forget exactly the amount that we have cash on hand, but similar to when I ran last year, hundreds of residents within the district and the state of New York are supporting our campaign. The vast majority of funds are individuals. I haven't taken any pledges other than last year I didn't take from real estate. This year, I'm not planning to take from real estate. I believe that it's important for the community to trust, especially in this district where we have a waterfront community that's developing rapidly. You will not see me taking from real estate from those developers. That I guarantee you. There's no corporate dollars, but if the local florist wants to make a contribution or the local doctor, I'm not going to turn that away. And I've always been an independent person. And, if somebody gives funds to my campaign committee, it doesn't mean that they're going to have a role in my legislative office. It's not like that at all. I'm completely independent and have always and will always be.
Thank you. So now you have 1 minute and we got to keep it strict, Elizabeth, to do your closing. Thank you so much for bearing with us as we tried to keep the time as best we could. We have a lot of candidates today.
No, I totally understand. And I'll stay within the minute. I appreciate the opportunity to be considered for endorsement. I believe you're going to endorse, I'm not sure, or just to be heard out about my vision for the 17th Senate District. Unlike most of the constituents, the neighbors, the voters in the district, they know me from the time that I've represented. They know and watched me grow up and raise my family here. And they know that I'm like them. And yes, at times I've struggled. When I had my children, I didn't have proper health insurance. I got into debt. It took me a long time to finally pay off credit debt, become a homeowner. Those types of struggles are the real life story of many of my neighbors. And I identify with it because I've lived through it. And we need leaders who can identify with the community so that I could work to make their lives better, to pass legislation, to improve the quality of life, to address the big issues on education, housing, transportation, and the environment. That's the type of state senator I plan to be, given the opportunity to represent as the next state senator of the 17th district. Thank you for the time tonight.
Thank you. Have a good night. Thanks
You
again.
too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So our next candidate is Kristen Gonzalez, and these questions and will be moderated by Raj Korpan.
Welcome to our candidate, Kristen Gonzalez. My name is Raj Korpan. I will explain the process and moderate today's forum. So you'll have 2 minutes for introduction, and then we'll ask about 7-ish questions where you'll have 90 seconds to respond to each of those. There might be a few follow-ups in which you'll get about 30 seconds to respond. After the questions, we'll have a 1-minute closing where you can give some closing remarks. And Sahan will be keeping time. He'll put 30 seconds in the chat and then say time when your time is up. So let's start off, if you don't mind, with your opening remarks.
Hi, sorry about that. I got an error message for unmuting. But hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Kristen Gonzalez, and I'm running for New York State Senate District 17. I was born and raised right here in Queens. I was raised in Elmhurst in a single parent household when my father from Columbia passed away when I was very young. And some of my earliest memories is of my mom struggling to provide us the baseline of a dignified life. What that meant for us was food on the table and a roof over our heads. And my mother, like all parents, didn't want me to struggle the way that she did. She emphasized that education was the path to a better life. When she got me a scholarship to go to an Upper East Side private school, I had my first introduction into the two New Yorks. I saw the New York for the rich, where every opportunity and resource was available, and the New York that I knew that was immigrant and working class, and where you could work like my mom 7 days a week and still be one disaster away from losing absolutely everything. That's what set me on a path to public service. From working in city council as part of the Young Women's Initiative, to working in the Obama White House doing Latino engagement, to working in Senator Schumer's office, what all of my experience in government has taught me is that the inequality we see today is entirely by design, and that the people who designed it are determined to keep it that way, and that the politicians that we have today that are bought out by special interests are not the one to stop them. That's why ever since leaving government, I returned back to my community in Queens, and I've reinvested myself in local organizing. I've worked on my community board where I've served on the executive committee. I've worked on the Western Queens Community Land Trust where I served as secretary on the founding board. I worked with an Internet for All campaign to bring and bridge the digital divide. I've also worked on mutual aid efforts and created the first community-led and community-owned resource library in the city with Mutual Aid NYC. I'm running because I know firsthand not only the struggles of our community, but because, like you, I am frustrated in a government that, for example, recently passed a budget that prioritizes building billion-dollar stadiums instead of building affordable housing. A government that had no plan for our community when our neighbors right here in Queens were dying in a pandemic. And so I'm running because I know that we need new leaders who are going to fight for us on the state level. And thank you so much. And I hope I see I'm at time. Thank you so much. And I'm excited to chat more with you today.
Thank you, Kristen. Our first question is from Lauren.
Got it.
Good evening, Ms. Gonzalez. My name is Lauren Clavin. You brought up the budget. And so this is a two-part question. You can answer in whatever order you wish. I wonder if you wanted to expand on your thoughts about the budget. And also, you did say in your questionnaire that you support the Invest in Our New York proposals that would raise taxes on the uber wealthy. Would you like to explain why?
Yes, absolutely. So I absolutely support the Invest in Our New York suite of bills because I do believe that the wealthy need to pay their fair share. And we actually had a surplus in the budget this year because we taxed the rich and had additional legislation passed. So it's crazy to me when we talk about the budget. What's incredible to me is that not only do we have a surplus and we find money, again, to give millions of dollars to a stadium, right? That is owned by a billionaire, that is owned by a wealthy family that will continue to feed into their wealth. But we didn't find money in the budget to, for example, pass fair pay for home care workers. We didn't pass good cause eviction. We didn't pass an expansion of the excluded workers fund. We didn't pass things to expand healthcare to everyone, regardless of immigration status. And of course, as someone who is incredibly concerned about the environment, is running as part of a Green New York slate, we didn't find the money to actually build renewable energy at a time when our Con Ed bills are rising. So as I mentioned, in my opening, I'm upset about it. And I think, I'm sure all of you are as well. And that's why it's so urgent that we need, especially with the new Senate seat in a district that ranges from Long Island City and Greenpoint and Ridgewood, Glendale, Maspeth, down into Ozone Park, Richmond Hill, and Woodhaven, a district that is geographically broad, but also diverse and represents East Asian, South Asian, and a Latino majority of working class immigrant families, that next time around, we win those things in the budget, because that's what's gonna help those working class families in our district.
Thank you so much. Our next question is from Jonathan.
Good evening, Kristen. We know from the new IPCC report that we're falling behind in our climate commitments. Today's report has a bigger message. The future we fear is not inevitable. In New York State, we have failed to produce adequate action to address the climate emergency. What do you think is the most important step or steps we should take? And the second part of my question is, do you support expanding our mass transit system? If so, how?
Yes, absolutely. To the second part of your question, we need to expand our mass transit system. As someone who is a strap hanger, so I take public transportation all the time, and who's running in a district that is incredibly large, as I mentioned, I'm seeing firsthand the challenges of just getting around to different parts of my district. So yes, we need to make mass transit more available, more frequent, and also really address transit deserts. But going to the first part of your question, and I talked a little bit about this before, I'm running as part of a Green New York slate. And what that means is that I'm dedicated to passing legislation like the Build Public Renewables Act, because I know that one of the best things we could do at the state level is create renewable energy. It is to fight back on monopolies like Con Edison that are continuously raising their prices, and ensure that we are not only actioning, like we said, in the next 3 years, but immediately. And it's another incredible failure of leadership in Albany is the fact that we haven't passed any climate legislation in the last 3 years. So, we found pennies in this budget for things like private energy, and that's not what we need. We need to build public renewables, and we need to prepare our communities for things like not only the climate crises ahead, but also prepare them and protect them by building green infrastructure, protect them from flooding, because we had our neighbors not only pass away in flooded basements, but we have neighbors who are still at risk of flooding in the future. So we need to action there as well.
Thank you.
All right, our next question comes from Ozzy.
Hi, Kristen. So this is on criminal justice. You're going to have 2 minutes. You can answer them as you see. You can divide the time as you see fit. First, it's about in Albany, final budget rollbacks. The final budget included rollbacks of New York's landmark 2019 bail reforms, changes to its discovery laws, and expansions of pre-arraignment detention and involuntary inpatient mental health treatment. Do you agree with these rollbacks? Which ones? Why or why not? And then that's one part. Second part is basically how you would address concerns about rising crime in New York City. And just some context, we've seen stuff on TV, we've seen some hate crimes, we've seen crime on the subway, and the other end of that, I think, is in 2020. There was a large uprising and asked for a reduction and claims that our police force is oversized. There's a lack of accountability, and the breadth of services and the breadth of responsibilities for the NYPD are unreasonable. Adams brought back stop and frisk and broken windows policing. Stop and frisk in its previous iteration was ruled unconstitutional in the courts. Adams and broken windows and stop and frisk both have been the data shows that they disproportionately target Black and Brown and poor folks. So how would you address the crime and then the rollbacks?
Yeah, really, really good questions and timely ones with the budget tonight. I want to start with the first part of your question. I am also devastated that we rolled back bail reform that was hard won and hard fought with no data showing that it's productive and actually productive for our communities. So I do not support those rollbacks, and as a state senator would fight against any other similar attempts. Going to the second part of your question with concerns around public safety and policing, as someone who comes from a family that has had members incarcerated, as someone who has myself been stopped and frisked in the past, also have had my belongings searched multiple times on the train. I don't support stop and frisk, and we need to do better for our Black and Brown communities. And what that looks like is increasing investment in resources for our community. What it looks like is increasing things like access to mental health resources and job opportunities and after school programs. There's so much with such an incredibly large budget that we could be doing. I do acknowledge that, of course, the NYPD is on the city level, but again, I am someone who is very dedicated to looking at public safety from the lens of things like not only not punitive, but looking at the preventative, getting to the root of a lot of issues and focusing on providing additional resources. So we're not just reactive, we're actually preventative in our measures. So I want to help reframe the conversation we're having right now around public safety in a way that doesn't criminalize or continue to criminalize our communities that have been historically over-policed, historically incarcerated at higher rates, and also harassed by policies like stop and frisk.
Thank you.
Our next question comes from Anicia. Anicia, you might be on mute. All right, I can ask Anicia's question. There have been a lot of complaints about homeless humans in public spaces, and a lot of complaints about how this mayoral administration has been clearing homeless encampments. According to the New York Times, on March 30th, the mayor's office of the NYPD, in partnership with the Department of Sanitation, cleared 239 encampments in 12 days, but only 5 people at those sites agreed to go to homeless shelters. This doesn't seem like a humane approach or an effective one. How do you think we should address homelessness?
Yeah, so I actually was having this conversation most recently in Greenpoint. A lot of the local organizers there were not only devastated by the cleaning of homeless encampments, but they were talking about how they had a relationship with those folks, that the encampment in that area wasn't the problem. It was well organized. Again, they had helped support a lot of their unhoused neighbors, but the problem in that area was illegal dumping, which had nothing to do with the folks who were there. And so they were devastated because, we're seeing a punitive approach by this administration that doesn't get to the root of a lot of issues, that doesn't center the voices of our community, even on a hyper local level, didn't consult the community leaders there, right, who had already been doing the work. And as an organizer who's done the work, I think that's a habit we see in government. And that's why we need new leadership that focuses first on empowering community leaders. And I think the second part of that is the affordable housing piece, right? That is the root. We're living in a city where rent prices are skyrocketing, where we refuse to pass legislation. So we need right now leaders who are going to be unequivocal on things like affordable housing, on things like access to, or passing bills like good cause eviction, passing bills like the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, ensuring that we have universal rent stabilization so people aren't being priced out, and also investing in more affordable housing to help not just clean encampments, but give those folks access to housing itself, because that is the number one thing that those folks are saying they need, not that they are choosing to be in the encampment. So I definitely want to, look at our housing legislation as a state senator.
And just quickly, 30 seconds, I believe Anicia has a follow-up question.
My question is, what about the senior housing situation in our district?
Yeah, so that actually, in addition to, talking about what had happened recently with homeless camping in Greenpoint, I also was speaking to community leaders there about how a lot of elderly neighbors who have been in Greenpoint their whole lives have been priced out. But that's a narrative that's not specific to just Greenpoint. That's a narrative that extends throughout the district. Everywhere, working class families and the elderly have been priced out by our rising rent prices and also the rising cost of living. So I absolutely, again, in talking about rethinking affordable housing, want to make sure that we're not pushing more of our folks out. Yeah.
Thank you.
Next question comes from Somali King.
Hi, Kristen. Thank you so much for being here. Let's talk about education. Education has become a divisive issue among parent communities throughout the city. We are hearing and reading more and more about parents' overall frustration of the entire education system. As a parent whose children have attended public, parochial, and private school, and who has gone through the middle school, high school, and most recently college admission process, my question for you is, what is your vision of education equity in these debates?
Right. So I appreciate that you also have a mixed education household as someone who spent part of her education in public school and part in private school. It's also worth mentioning, in the conversation and really thinking about our education platform in this campaign. I grew up in a U of T household after my mom became a paraprofessional, which is a special education teacher. And in seeing not only her, be supported by a good union job and the stability it gave us, the access to healthcare it gave us, I've been thinking a lot about what does our education policy look like when it supports students by things like, increasing funding for our public schools, by decreasing our classroom sizes, by also ensuring that students have access to guidance counselors, more mental health resources, and so much more, very similar to the policy recommendations we had when I was part of the Young Women's Initiative. But what does it also look like when we support our teachers, when we have classroom infrastructure, air conditioning in our classroom, when we have equitable transportation for them to get to work, and when we have access to the internet both for teachers and for students, which is why I worked on an Internet for All campaign that centered both students who were struggling with that and teachers as well. So in looking at our education platform, we're looking at parents, we're looking at teachers, and we're also looking at how to create an environment where every voice is represented, where families, again, have the baseline of their needs met so that students can focus on being students and not worry about, again, their basic dignities like housing and food not being met. Yeah. All
right, the next question comes from me, actually. It's a multi-part question, so you can answer each part however you see fit. How do you envision your role in the legislature? And how would you push an issue that perhaps the leader or governor doesn't support yet? And finally, how will you address the needs of your constituents, especially since this is a brand new district?
Yeah, great question in terms of two things, right? One, the responsibility of an elected to do the work of organizing other electeds around their issues. So if I wasn't supporting something, let's say the governor or leadership was supporting, because I am someone who's rooting all of our policy priorities on what is empowering working class families, it would mean that it was something not in the interest of empowering our working class, right? So I would definitely work to organize other electeds around that. But I'm also very proud to be part of two organizations like the Working Families Party and DSA that have blocks of elected officials that I could organize with around these issues. So I think that's also a really effective tool that is specific to this campaign that also gives us the opportunity to advocate for our constituents. And then moving into the second part of your question for constituent services. Again, as an organizer, constituent services is something I view very much in an organizing lens, meaning that it's not just helping our constituents solve issues on a day-to-day basis, which is the baseline of that, but it's how can we help expand our community's ability in the spirit of mutual aid to help each other? And how can we also use constituent services to increase access to resources, transparency, and close the knowledge gap about what resources in the city and state level exist? How can we do things like political education? How can we support and listen to our constituents so that it actually centers their voices, but also is accountable to them? So our office is accountable to all of those voices. And I'm at time, so I will stop.
Right, and our last question, I believe, will come from Somali as well.
So quickly, just to talk about your campaign, if you can just answer the following questions. How much money has your campaign raised? Did you accept any corporate contribution? Did you pledge not to accept contributions from real estate, health insurance, fossil fuel companies, or police unions? Why or why not?
I'm glad you're asking that question. I think it's really important to be clear about the fact that we won't be accepting money from big real estate, from fossil fuel companies, from corporate PACs. We haven't yet, we don't intend to. So far with fundraising, we've raised about $50,000, and we're really excited about our fundraising goals this month with a lot of our new endorsements. We have some great fundraisers coming up. I'd love to see you or your members and other members of our district there. But I think the other thing for us is in being clear about who we are taking money from and who we're not, and also focusing on small dollar donations. It's also about field, right? It's not only who's funding us, but how are we out in the community? So we're proud to say that over petitioning, we had over 500 shifts that we have, we're leveraging thousands of volunteers from our partner organizations, and we're building a coalition that actually represents this community with endorsers like the New York Immigration Coalition, like Make the Road, the Muslim Democratic Club, Sunrise, and so many more, and as well as overlapping electeds like Assemblymember Emily Gallagher and Assemblymember Zoran Mamdani. So I'm very excited about not only the work we've done around fundraising and field, but the work we've done to build a coalition that I hope CQuID will also be a part of.
Excellent. So we will now give you 1 minute for closing remarks.
All right. Thank you all so much for having me today. I know how long these can be, so you're all, I hope you're all hanging in there, but I want to thank you again. And I want to say that this new Senate seat, and working off of the answer I gave before, is an incredible opportunity to fight for essential legislation. We talked about things like good cause. We talked about Build Public Renewables. We talked about things like the New York Health Act and expanding healthcare access for all New Yorkers, regardless of status. So I hope in running for this seat and in winning, we will not only be able to deliver, but I hope to work with all of you in getting there. I will also say that as someone who, from my personal experience and lived experience, really represents the people and constituents in this district, I'm so excited to be running. So thank you all for your time. And again, hope if you have any questions, reach out, but hope to continue the conversation with all of you.
Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Have a good night. Bye,
Good
everyone.
night.
Bye.
I'll be turning it over to Ozzy, who will be moderating for the next candidate.
Thank you, Raj. Is our next candidate in the room? So our next candidate is, and I need help with the name. Miriam, can you?
Françoise Olivas.
Francoise.
Hi,
Olivas.
sorry. Hi, how are you? Sorry, we're also doing bath and bedtime, so I apologize for any background noise.
We appreciate you being here for our candidate forum. Just to give you a rundown of how it'll go, you have 2 minutes for an intro, and then we have about 7-ish questions, 90 seconds to answer a question, follow-up questions, if you could please answer within 30 seconds. Sahan is keeping time. If you look in the chat, he'll tell you when you have 30 seconds left, and he'll write time and say time, Sahan, when we hit that moment. First question. Oh, sorry. And then you have 1 minute to give your closing remarks. First question.
Opening remarks first.
The second time.
It's okay. It's 8:40. It's 8:40.
2 minutes.
So first, thank you so much for having me. My name is Françoise Olivas. As you know, I am running for the new Senate seat for the District 17. Part of why I'm running is, neighbors have been asking me to run for 3 years in Greenpoint. And it's a new seat. So I kind of was like, this is the time to do it and to try. I'm an avid environmentalist, and I think I really see this seat as an opportunity within Newtown Creek to really correct a lot of environmental justice in our community, and also to use the waterways as a form of transportation, because Queens is a transportation desert, as I am finding out, taking all the subway trains. I'm also part of a national movement trying to get more mothers into office. It's, I think the stat in Congress is of the women, less than 6% are mothers. And I think the pandemic has really boiled the care crisis. I mean, it's childcare to healthcare to elder care to the top. I've also been working in a big pivot from sustainable design, but in elder care and food insecurity during the pandemic. And being on the front lines of the pandemic, there are just so many things that are not working for the most vulnerable New Yorkers that, I thought I would step up and run for office. So I don't know if that's time, but thank you again for having me. And I did some research just about the club, and I think what I love so much is just the transparency to democracy. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Our first question will be asked by Lauren Cliven.
Good evening, Ms. Olivas. My name is Lauren Clavin. This is a two-part question. You can use your time to answer it in whatever way makes sense to you. You mentioned some issues that are important to you, including the care crisis as you spoke about it. I'm wondering if you wanted to comment on anything in the recent state budget that was passed that's important to you. And then you also said in your questionnaire that you support the Invest in Our New York proposals that would raise taxes on the uber wealthy. And I'm wondering if you could be more specific about what you support and why. Thank you.
So I think, we have a lot of problems that need to be solved, and, fortunately or unfortunately, money solves that, or will, allow us. I think we are seeing, we need a lot of help, in my opinion, in terms of mental health and social services. And so I think by rate, we're going to have to raise revenue somehow or another to do that, and to pay caretakers a livable wage. So I think, almost like in a tiered program, but like the more money you make, I think you may need to have an increase in your taxes. And then can you repeat the first question?
Yes, that was about the recently passed state budget. And I'm wondering if you wanted to,
I have a lot to say. We'll start with, I don't think we should be paying for a stadium. I think that money could be spent in a lot of ways. I think, being on the front lines of the pandemic, I think one of the biggest concerns to me is that people can't afford food. Our pantry lines are wrapped around the block, and that just shouldn't happen. So, I mean, I think that I would love to see that money allocated directly into our communities, so people have food, they have shelter, and they have the social services that they need.
Thank you. Our next question will be asked by Jonathan Lazo.
Good evening. We know from the new IPCC report that we're falling behind in our climate commitments. Today's report has a bigger message. The future we fear is not inevitable. In New York State, we have failed to produce adequate action to address the climate emergency. What do you think is the most important step or steps it should take? And do you support expanding our mass transit system? If so, how?
Okay, so climate first. One thing that I very much believe in is a circular economy. And I think that is something that we in New York State have the opportunity to do. I think during the pandemic, we've seen, because we are reliable on supply chains that are global, that we don't really manufacture or make things here anymore. So I think between our farmlands upstate, we have empty warehouses, that there's a lot that we can do to really talk about a circular economy. Would love to divest in fossil fuels, as well as end single-use plastic. I know it's such a little thing, but I've spent the past 2 years just cleaning up garbage in my neighborhood, and the amount of single-use plastic that is everywhere. It's just such a simple thing to do. We don't need our apples to be wrapped in saran wrap. Mass transit. I will say, I think I was in Richmond Hill, and to get back to Greenpoint, it was an hour and a half. And, I think that, Hochul has introduced, one way by land, but I do think, and this is when I'm kind of a water nerd, that we can use our waterways. We had the ferry here in Greenpoint, and it made transportation so much easier, but I also do think that we can be using the creek a little bit more. Was that everything?
Yeah, last
Okay.
question. The next question, I'm going to be the one asking. It's on criminal justice. You'll have 2 minutes to answer. You can divide the time as you see fit. So the first part is the budget in Albany that passed included rollbacks of New York's landmark 2019 bail reforms, changes to its discovery laws, and expansions of pretrial arraignment detention and involuntary inpatient mental health treatment. Do you agree with these rollbacks? And if you want to address anything specific. Second question is on the New York City level. We've seen concerns of rising crime. We've seen this on the news, hate crimes, things happening on the subways. And so our mayor has brought back stop and frisk and broken windows policing. Stop and frisk was ruled unconstitutional by the courts in its previous iteration. Both broken windows and stop and frisk has shown to disproportionately target Black and brown folks and the poor. Do you think this is the right approach to addressing crime, or how would you go about doing that? 2 minutes, divided as you see fit.
Good question for 2 minutes. So I disagree. Sorry, little human. I completely, disagree with what Adams has done. Sorry, this is just my reality.
Okay. If she wants to answer the question, feel free to jump in.
She actually, she's quite opinionated. She thinks that dogs and animals should be able to vote because she thinks humans aren't doing a very good job with the environment. Okay, so criminal justice reform. No, I don't think that Adams is doing the correct thing. I think something, a big part of why I'm running is I very much believe in mental health and in wellness. We are still in a pandemic. And I think that's affected everyone's mental health. I think also with people not working, if somebody is stealing food or stealing formula or stealing a basic necessity, that's a failure of our society. And we need to really address that by investing in social services and investing in mental health. The rollbacks in Albany. I think it's Brenda's law where you
Kendra's law, yeah.
Kendra's, sorry. I go back and forth on that. I do think that we have to be addressing mental health right now. I think that's so much of, I was speaking with some city workers and, they basically feel like they have, social services. Okay.
Thanks. Our next question is going to be asked by Anicia.
Good evening, Ms. Oliva. There's a lot of complaints about homeless humans in public spaces, and a lot of complaints about how this mayoral administration has been clearing homeless encampments. According to the New York Times on March 30, 30th, the mayor's office said the New York City Police Department, in partnership with the Department of Sanitation, cleared 239 encampments in 12 days, but only 5 people of those sites agreed to go to the homeless shelters. This doesn't seem like a humane approach on an effective one. My question is, how do you think we should address homeless?
I think there are a lot of reasons why people become homeless. It's, and now I'm going to get emotional, but after my father that raised me passed, we were homeless for 3 months, and I was 14 years old. My mother brilliantly disguised it as we went to sleepaway camp on scholarship. So I think we, again, need to invest in social services and in mental health. I think there's clearly a distrust in government where people do not want to go and take shelter. So I think it's really investing people who have the skill set to reach out to our homeless neighbors and see, why are they there? I know someone who, it was domestic violence that, she ended up couch surfing, sometimes sleeping outside for a while. So I go back to wellness and mental health and social services.
Nisi has a follow-up question, if you can just answer it in 30 seconds.
Yes, my other question is, how about seniors housing in our district? How are you planning to?
Okay. Senior housing. So I ended up reopening a senior center here, in Williamsburg. And it was extremely eye-opening. I really think that we need to, in some ways, prioritize and really reach out to our seniors, because I think if there's one thing I've noticed, there's very much a digital divide. And to meet seniors, the seniors that I work with, none of them wanted to, they wouldn't even take our, sorry.
Thank you. Next question will be asked by Somali King.
Hi, Francois. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My topic is on education. Education has become a very divisive issue among parent communities throughout the city. We are hearing and reading more and more about parents' overall frustration of the entire education system. Now, as a parent whose children have attended public, parochial, and private school, and who has gone through the middle school, high school, and most recently college admission process, my question for you is, what is your vision of education equity in these debates?
I think that we have to fully fund our public schools, and that is not something that we are currently doing. I think we also have to make sure that our teachers are being paid a living wage, because they're not. I think one thing is, with the PTA money that is raised, to share that across schools. There are some schools that raise millions from their PTA, and there are some that raise thousands, and that unfortunately is how so many public schools fund extracurricular activities. We are going to be PS public school parents for the first time, and I think even kind of the application process itself is daunting. I hear nightmares about middle school and high school, so not looking forward to that. But I also think it's looking at communities, and I speak to Greenpoint and Long Island City. That's what I'm more familiar with. But, we don't have the infrastructure to support working families here with the public schools. All of our public schools were overcrowded pre-pandemic. And, so I think it's really reevaluating this new district and seeing where the needs are for more schools.
We're going to go to Raj Korpan with our next question.
Hi, good evening. It's a multi-part question, so you can answer each of the parts how you see fit. So the first is, how do you envision your role in the legislature, and how would you push an issue that the leader or the governor may not support yet? And the second part is, how will you address the needs of your constituents, especially since this is a brand new district?
So coming from sustainable design and fashion, my nickname in the industry became the negotiator. And I would kind of laugh because I was the one with 2 art degrees, and I would be in boardrooms with, corporate lawyers of publicly traded companies. And I'd be like, well, what if? And usually, we would come to a compromise that would get, because I was very out of the box, didn't know that was my job, to be out of the box and to push the boundaries. So I think that is a skill set, is you have to be able to negotiate, and you have to be able, I believe very much in like the circle concept of a table, that you're a circle. So there is no head or, boss or someone who's more powerful. And then the constituents. So I have walked Myrtle Avenue to the very end of this district. And when you go, I know Greenpoint, I've lived here for like 17 years. So I know this, I know Long Island City, but getting to know the district, it is so beautifully diverse. And, there are concerns that are similar, and there are concerns that are very, very different. So, for me, it's a walking tour. It's, you have this time between the primary and between, entering office. I have done some work with our, local small businesses in Queens. Sorry, stop.
No, it's fine. Thank you. So you have a minute for your final remarks. I'm sorry. No, there was a question left. My mistake.
I'll see one more quickly. Just turning to your campaign, we just have some quick questions for you. How much money has your campaign raised? Did you accept any corporate contribution? Did you pledge not to accept contributions from real estate, health insurance, fossil fuel companies, or police unions? Why or why not?
Yes, I have pledged not to take money from police unions, real estate, fossil fuels, and what was the other one?
That was it.
Okay.
Health insurance.
Health insurance. Yes,
Medical.
health insurance. And I'm sorry, I'm listening to my daughter cry. What was the other question?
How much has your campaign raised?
Oh, around 20.
Okay. Now you actually have 1 minute to give your closing remarks, Francoise, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. So
it's today I was at Eleanor's Legacy, and it was really interesting to hear so many women who have been elected officials speak. And at one point they asked all the candidates to stand up, and they all said, for all the moms running, all the ones out there running with toddlers, you're bringing a voice that's not at the table. And that's part of why I am running is, I will never be a politician. I will always be a public servant. That is something that very much, I was, kind of raised to do. And I think it would just be the privilege of a lifetime to help steer our city and state out of these, very uncertain times. My work with small businesses is close to 20 years, and when I was walking down Myrtle Avenue, just kind of really envisioning the type of green future that we can have, this is really a once in a lifetime opportunity. We have a lot of work to do, socially and environmentally. So thank you so much.
Thanks again, and good night to you. And
yeah, so I'm so sorry about that.
No,
thank you for understanding. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.
So our last candidate will be moderated by Ashley Reed.
Thank you, Ozzy. And our last candidate for tonight, last but not least, we have Mr. Japneet Singh. Is Mr. Singh here? Hello,
Yes.
Mr. Singh. Welcome. So just to go over really quickly, the format, you will be given 2 minutes to give us a brief introduction, followed by 7-ish questions. There may be some follow-up. You'll have 1.5 minutes to answer each question. And then finally, you'll have 1 minute of closing remarks. Okay, so thank you for being here. And you can begin your opening remarks.
First and foremost, thank you for hosting us and correcting my name as well. I appreciate that. But no, it's an honor to be even considered. But for me and my community, this campaign is not about politics. It's about being seen. We had a struggle in the last couple of months fighting for fair lines for all communities that live in Queens County, the entire state of New York. And if you saw this new map, it stunned us when it came out. A lot of people were shook as to like, how can these lines even be, passed? And if you guys, any of you guys attended the hearing that happened in Queens County, it was actually one of the longest hearings, especially from people in Southeast Queens, to get at least some kind of assembly district, some kind of Senate district that had fair representation. And now what they did is they connected Eastern Queens, South of Richmond Hill, they connected Ozone Park all the way down to Long Island City and Greenpoint, Maspeth. And that's just, for every community in this district, it just kind of sucks, and me being the only Eastern Queens candidate, you want someone that can connect. You want someone that can bridge, that can build a bridge between all communities. And me having the experience I have as being an organizer, as being a former taxi and Uber driver, that even though I grew up in Richmond Hill and still live here, I breathe this air every single day. I also, since the age of 19, have been driving and serving the communities of Western Queens, of Northern Brooklyn, of the middle part, Central Queens area as well. So, when this, how they say, like, you have to find the blessing in disguise. And this was it. You want to make sure that even though this is a new seat, you have a person that can represent your community well as everybody else as well.
Okay, and thank you for those opening remarks. We'll begin our questions. And just to reiterate, you will have 30 seconds to answer any follow-up questions that we might have. So our first question comes from Lauren.
Good evening, Mr. Singh. Thank you for being here. So this is a 2-part question. You can divide your time in whatever way makes sense for you. I'm wondering if you have any comments first on the recently passed state budget. And then you said in your questionnaire that you support the Invest in Our New York proposals that would raise taxes on the very wealthy. And I'm wondering if you could be more specific on what you support about those bills and why. Thank you.
In regards to the budget, I think we shouldn't even be surprised. When so many of the legislature people that are serving on the legislature are returning members, are people that have been serving. My assembly person in Southeast Queens has been there for 30+ years, and so many other people have been there for so many years. So if we expect different results, we're absurd. So we want to make sure that's why this seat is so important. You need someone that is outside this establishment, that is connected to the people. And this is why this campaign makes it so much more greater and so much is invested in this, because you want someone that will go there and bring a change, that will actually listen to working class people and bring that voice to the table. Second, to your part about the tax the rich, 100%, if you're not paying your fair share, then we need to make sure that they are kept accountable. Even I was a student body president at Queens College not too long ago, and we made sure that there's an organization called Chartwell's that was the caterer of our campus. And when they want to get the contract, we want to make sure that they're A, taxed properly, and B, that they actually invest in our community. So if they're not providing either, then that's absurd to me, and we need to make sure that they're kept accountable. And me, as your Senate candidate and your senator, hopefully, we'll make sure we do that.
Thank you, and thank you for staying within our time. Our next question will come from Jonathan.
Good evening, Mr. Singh. We know from the new IPCC report that we're falling behind in our climate commitments. Today's report has a bigger message. The future we fear is not inevitable. In New York State, we have failed to produce adequate action to address the climate emergency. What do you think is the most important step or steps we should take? Do you support do you support expanding our mass transit system? If so, how?
The first part of your question, I think it's crazy to me that we expect working class people to change overnight, but our establishments, our government hasn't even implemented the changes in their own offices or their own facilities. So I think the first thing we need to do, and me, if I have a chance to and the honor of being on the table, we have to look at ourselves and see how we can implement these changes and be more climate efficient at the government buildings, at all the government facilities, and make sure that we set a blueprint. Hey, listen, this is how you be cost efficient. This is how we can take care of the environment. And now you can do it too. And this is how we're going to help you do it. Second, in terms of mass transit, 100%. I live in Richmond Hill. I'm the first and last stop off the A line. And trust me, you do not want to know how long it takes me to get into the city. It's crazy. And another thing, in Eastern Queens, we do not have any city bike facilities as well. So people here are bikers. People want to have access to different resources, and this is something that the community wants, but it's never been, never even considered, or it was never even given a chance. So I think, me being a biker myself, as a person that takes a lot of public transit, we want to make sure that we bring those resources here and we advocate from Eastern Queens, and then going into areas that I know in the Maspeth, Middle Village, there's a big demand there as well. We work with all communities in this district and work together to make sure we increase mass transit throughout the district.
Great, thank you. Our next question will come from Ozzy.
Hi, Jupneet. I'm going to ask about some criminal justice. So first, Albany, the budget just passed and included where rollbacks of New York's landmark 2019 bail reforms, changes to its discovery laws, and expansions of pre-arraignment detention and involuntary inpatient mental health treatment. Do you agree with these rollbacks? Feel free to address any of them. And then the second part of the question is just about rising crime in New York City on the city level. Our mayor has decided that broken windows policing and stop and frisk is the approach. Is one approach that he wants to use to fight crime, and stop and frisk was previously ruled unconstitutional the way it was done by a prior administration. Both stop and frisk and broken windows policing have proven to show that it disproportionately targets Black and brown folks and the poor. So one question is, do you think that's the right approach for crime? And the other question is about the rollbacks in Albany. You have 2 minutes, divided as you see fit.
I'll start the rollbacks. I think there was a research conducted by the New York Times about 100,000 people after when it was initially introduced, 100,000 people that were arrested. When they were released, about 20% of those people were caught again. And out of those 20%, 2% were felonies. So I think, again, we need to do a better job of also identifying who we're arresting, of course, but also kind of keeping tabs on what is their criminal history. I come from a community, we left our countries, respective countries, to escape lawlessness, and to see the same thing happening or some criminal activity going on the uprise again in New York City, where we live. I've been here since the age of 1. That's unacceptable. And, I think a lot of New Yorkers are genuinely upset about that. However, if it's a first-time offender or someone that doesn't have a criminal history, we definitely need to make sure that we protect that person's future. One thing I always said is that the criminal system does nothing to rectify the person that goes in there. Unfortunately, it's just a time gap. You go in there, you come back like you went in before. So you're not really getting any kind of, resources or skilled labor that you can come back and be an asset to society. So I think that those are things that are more deeper, and we need to fix those as well. In terms of rising crime and stop and frisk, look, I'm a man with the turban, man. So if anybody knows what stop and frisk, I definitely had to see the consequences of that firsthand. And do I support it? Definitely not. But also I understand that when you implement a quota system, that doesn't do anything to help that cause. So I think it also, if the mayor does plan on implementing those, we got to see how he's planning on doing it and how much pressure the police enforcement has to enforce these things on Black and brown folks. And if they're doing it again in a way where they have to fulfill a quota, then you're not helping the community, you're harming the community.
Thank you.
Thank you. And to switch gears, we have a question from Anicia.
Good evening, Ms. Ding. There's a lot of complaints about homeless humans in public spaces, and a lot of complaints about how this mayoral administration has been clearing homeless encampments. According to the New York Times on March 30th, the mayor's office said the New York Police Department, in partnership with the Department of Sanitation, cleared 239 encampments in 12 days, but only 5% people of those sites agreed to go to the homeless shelters. This doesn't seem like a humane approach or an effective one. My question to you, how do you think we should address homelessness?
How should we what?
Homelessness.
How should we address homelessness?
How we should address
got it.
homelessness.
Okay. So I think the first thing, again, homelessness, if you just look at homelessness as it's just homelessness itself, you can't solve the problem. There's so many deeper issues with homelessness. There's mental health issues, there's education issues, there's trauma issues. We want to make sure that, again, if we're addressing these things such as these broad topics of homelessness, we also do a great job on taking care of the subcategories such as the ones I mentioned. So I think, again, if we want to help and bring down the numbers for one category, we need to help and bring down the numbers for other categories. And again, like, that's one thing that during the pandemic, I worked with a lot of people in need, whether it's giving meals, whether it's bringing them to rehab centers. So we do this work on the ground, and there is an approach if we fix the core issue. We keep talking about these broad topics that are not going to get anything done unless we fix the core issue that are plaguing our society. And, we talk about this, we make headlines, we say this, we say that, but no one's doing it. No one's doing it. Not the establishment, not this mass movement that's been going on in this country, but we need to make sure we take the resources to the people that are honestly struggling every single day.
Thank you. What about the senior housing crisis that we are having in our districts?
30 seconds for that one.
Yes, the senior centers, again, I work with a lot of senior centers, and the thing with senior centers is that they want to be heard. They feel like, again, they're not a part of the equation, and unfortunately, they never felt a part of the equation because they were never brought to the table. And again, if I have the chance to represent this district, I would love to work hand in hand with senior centers, with all different facilities in the district to make sure that everyone feels a part of this district and everybody feels a part of our neighborhoods and communities.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, our next question will come from Somali.
Hi, Janif. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My topic is education. Education has become a divisive issue among parent communities throughout the city. We are hearing and reading more and more about parents' overall frustration of the entire education system. As a parent whose children have attended public, parochial, and private school, and who has gone through the middle school, high school, and most recently the college admission process, my question for you is, what is your vision of education equity in these discussions?
Well, I want to wish you luck, and I know it's a big process, especially going to college. I'm a proud product, of public school in my entire life. I have not left the county of Queens. Went to PS 100, MS 226, John Adams High School, and Queens College. I have both my BA as well as my MS at Queens College. I had the chance of serving as student body president, and under my student leadership, we were the first leadership group that was successfully able to freeze tuition. And I think there's no future without education. I think there's no future without investment in public education. We keep talking about the youth is the future, the now is the tomorrow, but no one's doing anything. I've been hearing this invest in CUNY conversation, invest in public education conversation for the last 7 years, okay? And no one's done a thing. And we want to make sure we have people that can credit their success, actually credit their success to their educational past. And that's me. I learned more outside the classroom than inside the classroom. Even though I have my master's in accounting, I'm running for public office, and that's all because of public education. So I want to make sure that people have the same access, but we cannot do that without having the right people involved.
Great, thank you. Our next question comes from Raj.
Hi, Sat Sri Akal. Welcome. I have a multi-part question for you, and you can answer it in whatever order you'd like. How do you envision your role in the legislature, and how would you push an issue that the leader or governor may not support yet? And the second part is, how will you address the needs of your constituents, especially given that this is a brand new district? And you kind of alluded to this earlier, but you can maybe speak about it a little bit more.
My role in the legislature will be, in one word, different, right? There's not many of me and many of us in that space. And I'm not just bringing myself, I'm bringing an entire community. Like I said, there's no one in my neighborhood that's representing on the city, state, or federal level. No one that breathes the air I breathe. No one that went to my schools. And I want to make sure that that kind of blue collar nature that I bring to the table is represented in full fledged on that stage. And the other part to your question, we want to make sure that the district doesn't feel like it's only one neighborhood is being represented. And since, again, like I mentioned earlier, my experience as a taxi driver, listen, I started driving taxi when I was 19 years old. That's how I got through school, okay? And the things I've seen LIC develop in front of my own eyes. I've seen Greenpoint develop. I've seen all these neighborhoods go through the changes it's gone through. And I think I'm the only one that can say that about both sides. And the middle as well. So, me bringing this diverse experience, bringing this diverse experience to the table will help a long way. And on top of that, when you said, oh, if the mayor or if you want to get the mayor or the governor to listen to you or agree with you or whatever the case may be, we do what we do best is make sure we amplify it, make sure we bring the community to the table. And we're dealing with a hate crime right now. What we did, we made sure the community was together, we amplified it, and the governor's on it, the mayor's on it, we have members of Congress on it, we had Chuck Schumer out in Queens yesterday. So we want to make sure we put so much pressure that they have to do something about it.
Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. And our final question for tonight comes from Maria.
I will I'll do that.
Oh, I'm sorry, Somali.
Maria's having some audio issues.
Right.
So just can you just answer the following questions about your campaign? How much money has your campaign raised? Did you accept any corporate contribution? And do you pledge not to accept contribution from real estate, health insurance, fossil fuel companies, or police unions? Why or why not?
First and foremost, I think I joined the race the latest. I don't have no county behind me. I don't have this mass movement behind me. I have the people behind me. And right now, I want to make sure before I ask anybody for money, I'm on the ballot. And thankfully, today I am on the ballot with 4,000 signatures. I need 900 to get on there, and that was all by the people. So now we're gonna officially we're gonna start raising money. I think we raised up until this point, raised about maybe 5,000, but we have pledges from community members. And I personally, they want to donate money. I just didn't want to take it. I want to make sure I'm on the ballot first. And thankfully, with the grace of God, I'm there. And now we're gonna make sure we amplify those targets and make sure we hit the numbers we need to. But again, I don't believe in raising crazy amount of money. At the end of the day, these are hard. This is people working very hard for their money. I want to make sure that our message gets across to people, and people like you, the platform you have is what's going to help do that. And second, in terms of real estate, I don't think real estate, those entities are going to give me money, to be totally honest. But if they do, again, I will have to look at who's giving it and what's their history. I'm not going to take money from people I do not know what their track record is. If I see shady business, I'm not going to accept it. But if there's someone that wants to donate, and I think it can help our campaign, I'm not going to also sell out. I'm going to make sure that they understand they're donating, but don't expect that I'm going to only be your advocate. I'm the people's advocate.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so now you have time to give your closing remarks. Anything you'd like to say to our club or?
First and foremost, I want to just thank you guys again. I know it's late on a weekday, but you guys took out time to host this, and I think you guys have another one you're hosting. So what you guys are doing, what your platform is doing, is giving people like myself that may not have the crazy money or the glitz and glamour of a mass movement or establishment, the chance to be heard, the message to be heard. And again, like my story is a working class story. This is not about my mama. This is not about my papa. This is about me and what I've gone through and what my experiences have been. Me being as a taxi driver, me going to public school, that's all me. And the fact that people think that, the big money can win an election is funny to me. So I want to make sure that the people have a choice. And me being the only Eastern Queens candidate, we are giving people a choice. So thank you once again. I hope you consider me for your endorsement. And I'm just honored I could be a part of this program today. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Singh, thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for staying up late with us. Miriam, I believe, wanted to make a comment.
Right, so thank you everybody who's been with us tonight. Ozzy just put our link to our website in the site. I hope those of you who aren't members, who live in Central Queens or nearby, might want to join us. And I also want to emphasize something that I should have said at the beginning, but I flaked. When we make our decisions, this is a club that is very committed to being activist. And once we vote on who we're going to endorse, we've made a commitment to doing at least 2 field events for each of our endorsed candidates. And I hope you all, some of you join us, and whether you're a member or not, you can join us in doing that active work. I hope this event helped clarify for you all who you would want to support. Okay,
Thank you,
that's all.
Miriam. And I just want to take a moment to thank our Electoral Action Committee, which was led by Miriam, because they put so much time, effort, and work into making this happen. So fortunately, at this point, for anyone who's not a club member, which is why you should join, we're going to be having an internal discussion on our endorsements. So we're going to ask you to please leave the Zoom. And we want to see you at the next meeting. Like Maria said, we'll be looking at doing some stuff in person too, and maybe offer some hybrid.
Yes, I'm going to stop